What if Issei saved by Ophis instead of Rias and got her pregnant? The rain over Ko came down the way bad decisions do, gradually at first, then all at once. Issei Hayato was 20 years old, had been out of high school for 2 years, and was walking home from his part-time job at a hardware store in the kind of philosophical mood that descended on him sometimes in the late evenings, when the day had been long enough to make him tired but not long enough to make him sleepy. He was thinking, with the unfocused earnestness that characterized most of his thinking, about the fact that his life had been consistently, reliably, almost impressively ordinary, and whether that was a complaint or simply an observation. He had grown up in Ko. He had gone to Ko Academy. He had graduated, unremarkably, into the same town with the same streets and the same quality of late evening rain. He had 2 friends, Matsuda and Motohama, whose company he valued in the specific way you value people who have known you long enough that there's no performance required, and he had a mother who made excellent food and a father who watched sports too loudly, and he had, overall, a life that was perfectly decent and somehow felt, in the quiet moments, like a waiting room. He didn't know what he was waiting for. He was going to find out. Her name, he would learn later, was Rainier. She appeared from the rain the way things that were never human tend to appear, too suddenly, without the gradual approach of someone who had been getting closer, as though the space between elsewhere and here had simply been revised. She was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, entirely, uselessly, in a way that had nothing to do with you. She said his name. He stopped. "Do I know you?" he asked, with the reasonable confusion of someone encountering a very attractive woman in the rain who knows his name and has not, to his knowledge, been introduced. "No," she said. "But I know you." She tilted her head, and the rain fell around her in a way that seemed, somehow, too deliberate. "I've been watching you for a while, Issei Hayato. You have something I need." Later, people who knew about these things would tell him that Rainier had been watching the boosted gear, that Drake's sacred gear had registered on the monitoring systems of every faction with the sensitivity to track such things, and that a fallen angel operative with orders to neutralize a potential threat had been assigned to deal with him quietly. They would tell him that she had done it before, that she was very good at it. He didn't know any of that in the moment. In the moment, he knew only that something happened, a flash of light, a pain so enormous it was almost abstract. The rain on asphalt smells suddenly very close because he was very close to the asphalt, on his hands and knees, with something burning through him from the inside with the specific quality of something that was not supposed to be happening to a person. He had been hit by a light spear, his left side. He fell. The rain kept coming down. He could hear Rainier say something clinical and a little bored, the voice of someone completing a task, and he could hear her footsteps on the wet stone, moving away, unhurried. The rain was cold on his face. He could see it falling, each drop distinct and silver against the lamplight, and he thought distantly that it was a strange thing to be looking at in what appeared to be the last moments of his life, but that it was also, objectively, kind of beautiful. He thought, "I never figured out what I was waiting for." He thought, "That seems like a waste." The rain fell, and then something else happened. He didn't see it arrive. He felt it. It was the way you feel a pressure change before a storm, not the storm itself, but the atmosphere reorganizing itself around the approaching fact of it. A quality of presence so enormous that presence was almost the wrong word for it. Presence implied a thing that was here rather than elsewhere, and what he felt was something that made the concept of location seem temporarily optional. The pain, which had been everything, contracted, not because it lessened, but because something else arrived that was so much larger that even enormous pain became, in comparison, a relatively minor data point. He managed to turn his head. She was standing in the rain. She looked. This was the first thing he registered, through the pain and the failing focus and the very loud insistence of his body, that it had been fatally damaged. Young. A girl, he would have said, except that the word girl implied a range of temporal scale that was immediately, obviously wrong. Small. Dark hair that fell in 2 heavy loops. A dress that was dark and simple. Eyes that were gold and contained, in their gold, something that made the word gold feel insufficient. She was looking at him the way you look at something you have assessed and are deciding about. He looked back. "Hey," he said, because he had never been good at not saying something. She blinked. This seemed, from her expression, to be an unexpected development. You are still conscious, she said. Her voice was even, not cold, exactly, but with the quality of something that had been calibrated very precisely over a very long time, and that calibration had not previously needed to account for the variable of a critically injured young man saying hey. Apparently, he said. I don't know for how long. He tried to take stock of himself and found the inventory depressing. Are you? He stopped. There was something in the air around her that was registering as significant even through the pain. Are you the one making it feel like the atmosphere is doing something weird? She looked at him. Yes, okay. He decided this was acceptable. He had bigger problems. I've been stabbed. With light. I think I'm dying. Yes, she said again. Is there? He paused. It was getting harder to maintain the thread of words. Is there anything you can do about that? Or are you here for some other reason? She was quiet for a moment. The rain fell between them. He could feel his heartbeat becoming less reliable, the way a signal becomes less reliable at distance. Present, then present, then present, then. I don't know yet, she said. That's honest. He laughed, which hurt enormously. Take your time. I'll wait. She looked at him. He felt, through the failing focus and the enormous pain and the rain on his face, her attention land on him, not the way attention usually lands, like a hand on a shoulder, but the way gravity lands, as a fact of the space you occupy. She was looking at him with the total, undiscriminating clarity of something that has no reason to look away, and he felt, absurdly, seen. There is something in you, she said. Yeah. He coughed. Red Dragon. Boosted gear. Long story? It is not a long story, she said. I know the story. You know Drake? I know Drake. She was quiet. He has been noisy for 20 years. I have been aware of him since before this body of his was formed. Something stirred in the back of his consciousness, a rumble, deep and old, the way mountains are old, the presence that had been part of him for as long as he could remember existing but that had, until now, been largely a sleeping warmth rather than an active voice. Partner, it said, in the registers below's sound. Do you feel that? He felt that. Ophis, Drake said, and even in the scaled-down internal communication, the weight in the name was enormous. Drake, said the woman in the rain, and she was looking at Issei, not past him, but at him, and the rain fell around her with its deliberate silver quality. Your Ophis, Issei said. Yes. The infinite dragon god. Yes. He processed this for a moment. He was dying. A heavenly dragon was rumbling in his chest, and the infinite dragon was standing in front of him. His life, which had been a waiting room, had taken a significant turn. Okay, he said. Cool. She looked at him. Why are you not more frightened? She asked, and he got the sense that this was a genuine question, not rhetorical, not a test. She actually wanted to know. I mean, he said, I'm definitely concerned about the dying part. But you seem, he struggled for words through the narrowing focus. You seem like you're thinking about something. Not threatening. He paused. Are you thinking about something? She was quiet for 3 seconds. He counted them, because each one was taking considerable effort to remain present for. I am considering, she said, whether to revive you. What are the options? I could leave. You would die. The sacred gear would be dormant until the next host. She said it without cruelty, with the flat factuality of someone enumerating data. Or I could use void power to reconstruct what the light spear destroyed. It would change you. Significantly. You would not be entirely what you are now. He thought about this for the time he had available to think, which was not much. What would I be? He asked. Something new. She looked at him. I don't know precisely. I haven't done it before. Why would you do it? For me specifically? She was quiet again. The rain fell. Her gold eyes held something he couldn't read yet. Couldn't read it partly because he was very nearly dead and partly because he didn't yet have the vocabulary for the things those eyes contained. Drake has been part of this world for a long time, she said. He has been. She paused, in the manner of someone who rarely explains themselves and is finding the machinery slightly unfamiliar. He has been something I was aware of. Without being near. She looked at Issei with the direct, Unarchived honesty of something that does not know how to be indirect. And you spoke to me, I said. Hey, yes. Something in her expression shifted, infinitesimal and significant. No one says that to me. He laughed again, and it cost him more than the previous one. He was down to very little now. The lamplight had acquired the quality of things seen through water. He could feel the edges of himself becoming imprecise. Okay, he said. I trust you. She looked at him. You don't know me, she said. No. His voice was barely there. But you're standing in the rain thinking about whether to save me, which means you care about the answer, which means, he didn't have words for the rest of it. He didn't have enough of himself left to find them. Just, do what you think is right. The last thing he felt, before the darkness that was not sleep but was adjacent to it, was her hand, small, cool, precise, placed flat against his chest. And through it, something that had no word in any language he knew, something vast and quiet and complete, the way deep ocean is complete, the way the space between stars is complete. Void, said Drake in the registers below sound, and there was something in the way he said it that wasn't just recognition. Then there was nothing. He woke up somewhere that was not the rain-wet street. The first thing he established was the ceiling, stone, smooth, with the quality of something very old that had been very carefully maintained. The second thing was the light, which was sourceless in a way that meant either he had died and this was whatever came after, or the architecture here did not require conventional light sources. The third thing was the silence, which was different from ordinary silence, not the absence of sound but the presence of something else, a quality of complete that made ordinary silence seem thin by comparison. The fourth thing was her, sitting in a chair at approximately 2 meters distance, watching him with her gold eyes and no particular expression. You're alive, she said. Am I? He sat up slowly. His body felt different. Not wrong, exactly. Like a familiar room that had been rearranged while he was out. Same furniture, different configuration. He could feel Drake's presence, which was normal, but around it something else. A resonance that hadn't been there before, like a second instrument playing a harmony he hadn't known the melody could support. Yes. She was still watching him. It worked. You sound surprised. I was uncertain, she said. The theoretical basis was sound. The practical application had no precedent. He looked at his hands. They looked like his hands. What did you do exactly? She explained it in the way she seemed to do most things, directly, without softening, with the precision of someone who has no investment in making information easier to receive, only in making it accurate. The light spear had destroyed substantial portions of his internal architecture. She used that word, architecture, and he found it oddly apartment. She had used void power to reconstruct what was damaged, but void power was not neutral. It was her, the fundamental essence of what she was, the infinite, quiet power that sat outside every hierarchy of heaven and earth. What she had put into him to save him was part of herself, and it had not replaced what was already there. It had integrated. So he said, when she was finished. I'm part dragon. Part void, part boosted gear host, part void-derived reconstruction, she said. And whatever you were before both of those things, which appears to be, she paused, and he got the sense she was choosing her words with unusual care. Persistent, he repeated. You said hate to me while you were dying, she said. In my experience, which is considerable, that is unusual. He looked at her, this small, ancient, gold-eyed presence in the chair, who had found him bleeding on a wet street and had made a decision she'd never made before and was now watching him process its results with the focused stillness of someone who was genuinely, carefully curious about what would happen next. He thought about what she had said. No one says that to me. How long have you been alone? He asked. Her expression didn't change. But something behind her expression did, very slightly, like a tide moving in deep water, visible only if you were watching carefully. I don't answer that question, she said. That's fine. He stretched, experimentally, taking inventory of the new configuration of himself. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to. He looked around the room, stone walls, the sourceless light, a window that showed something outside that was not any landscape he recognized. Am I able to leave? Or is this, you can leave, she said. When you're stable. Am I not stable? The integration is still completing. Another few hours. She looked at him with the same direct attention she'd had in the rain. You should rest. He nodded. He lay back, looking at the ancient ceiling, feeling the new architecture of himself with careful attention, the void resonance alongside Drake's familiar rumble, like two rivers joining, finding their combined current. Ophis, he said. Yes, thank you. He said it simply, the way he said true things, without emphasis, without performance. For standing in the rain and thinking about it. And for deciding the way you decided. She was quiet for a moment. Rest, she said. He closed his eyes. In the space below his conscious thoughts, Drake was doing something he had never done before in all his long, combative, world-shaking existence. He was quiet, not dormant, not sleeping. Just, for the first time in longer than most things had been alive, genuinely, fully at peace. The room had existed for longer than Ko had been a city. Issei understood this the way you understand things that are too large to verify directly, not through evidence exactly, but through the quality of the air, the texture of the silence, the particular patience that old places develop when they have been waiting long enough that waiting has become their primary characteristic. The stone walls had the smooth, settled look of surfaces that had never needed to justify their existence. The sourceless light had the evenness of something that had never been installed, only always been present. He had slept for 6 hours. He knew this because at some point while he was sleeping someone had placed a clock on the small table beside the bed, round, simple, analog, sitting in the ancient room with the cheerful incongruity of something that had not gotten the architectural memo. He had looked at it for a while before realizing that she had put it there so he would know how much time had passed. He found this, the care of it, the practicality, the way it was helpful without being sentimental, unexpectedly moving. He sat up. He felt, objectively, better than he had any right to feel. The memory of the light spear, the obliterating, absolute quality of that pain, was present but distant, the way the memory of a bad dream is present in the morning, identifiable, no longer dangerous. His body had completed whatever reconfiguration the void power had initiated, and the result was something he could feel at the edges of his awareness, like a new room in a house he'd always lived in, its door now open, its contents waiting to be understood. Drake was awake. Partner, the dragon said, and the low register below conscious thought that Issei had grown up with so gradually he'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing the sound of a river when you live near one. How do you feel? Different, Issei said aloud, because he'd always found it easier to talk to Drake out loud when he was alone. Not bad different. Just different, yes. A pause. The rumble of it had a quality he hadn't heard before, something almost like self-consciousness, which was not an emotion he associated with the Welsh dragon. There is something I should tell you. About her, about Ophis, about Ophis. Another pause. But perhaps she should be present. What I need to tell you, she has a right to hear it too. And it will make more sense with her there. Okay. He swung his legs off the bed. Where is she? Close, Drake said, with the tone of something that has been aware of a presence for a very long time, and is only now admitting what that awareness has always meant. She is always close, now. The void she put in you, it created a connection. Nothing controlling. Simply, awareness. She'll know you're awake. He was pulling on his jacket, which had been folded on the chair, cleaned of rain and blood, which meant she had done that while he was sleeping. Another small practical kindness that he filed alongside the clock. When the door opened, she came in without knocking, which made sense, given that it was her space and knocking implied uncertainty about welcome, and he was getting the impression that uncertainty was not a primary mode for her. She was wearing the same dark dress. Her hair was the same, and her eyes were the same gold, and she looked at him with the same direct assessment. You slept, she said? Yeah. Thank you for the clock. She was still for a moment, just a fraction of a second, the way someone is still when something lands slightly differently than expected. You noticed. It was helpful. He sat back on the edge of the bed, because standing seemed like it might be making a statement he hadn't decided on yet, and the chair was at an awkward distance. How are you? She looked at him. I don't answer that question often, she said. You don't have to answer it often, he said. Just now, if you want. The gold eyes held him for a moment. Uncertain, she said finally. What I did last night has no precedent. I don't have a framework for evaluating its consequences. I'm one of its consequences, he said. Yes, and I feel okay. So that's at least one data point. She looked at him steadily. You are very calm about this. I'm the kind of person who calms down after the initial shock, he said. The initial shock was the dying part. I've processed that. Now I'm in the part where I want to understand what happened. He paused. Drake says he wants to tell us something. Both of us. He said you should be here for it. Something moved in her expression, the recognition of a name, but more than recognition. The way you look when someone mentions something you've been aware of for a very long time that you haven't spoken about. He's been quiet, she said. Since last night. Drake is not known for quiet. I know. Issei looked at the gauntlet forming on his arm. He hadn't consciously summoned it, but it appeared anyway, the familiar red and green of the boosted gear's dormant state. Drake's presence visible in the jewel at its center, currently a deep, settled amber rather than its usual active green. He says he wants to talk. Ophis crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite the bed with the efficient grace of someone who has inhabited many spaces and carries no anxiety about any of them. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at the gauntlet, and he watched her look at it, and he thought about the fact that she had stood in the rain last night making a decision no one had ever made, and that the decision had included something about being aware of Drake, and that the word she had used was not monitored or tracked but aware, which was a different kind of word. Drake, Issei said. She's here. The jewel pulsed. The amber deepened for a moment, and then Drake's voice came, not in the below sound register of their private communication, but externalized, a sound that occupied the air in the room like a physical presence, deep and old and enormous. Ophis, he said. The quality of her stillness changed. Very slightly. The way a surface changes when something it's been holding is set down. Drake, she said. And in her voice was something that matched what he had felt in the rain, not quite recognition, but the weight of things that have existed in relation to each other for a long time. I have wanted to say something for a considerable time, Drake said. Various circumstances made it impractical. A pause that had texture. The fighting. The ceiling. The hosts. Another pause. But now my host and your void share a space, and there is no practical reason to continue saying nothing. What is it? Issei asked. The story that exists about Ophis and the heavenly dragons, Drake said, is the story of separation. Of opposition. The infinite dragon who existed outside the hierarchy, whom Great Red drove from the dimensional gap, who became the symbol and the center of Khaos Brigade's ambitions. He paused. This story is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Ophis was watching the gauntlet. Watching the jewel. Her expression had the quality of careful attention. When I was formed, when Great Red was formed, when the world was young enough that formed is almost the wrong word, more like when the world was assembling itself from available potential, Ophis was already present. Drake's voice had shifted slightly, the way voices shift when they move from reporting to remembering. She was not a threat. She was not an obstacle. She was simply there. As the ocean is there. As the space between things is there. A pause. We were aware of each other for a long time before there was any conflict. You knew each other, Issei said. Knew is a complicated word for entities at that scale, Drake said. But yes. In the way that things which exist in the same world are always, at some level, in relationship to each other. He paused. Ophis sought silence. The dimensional gap was the right place for that. When she was removed from it, she lost not only her home but the only place that had ever been correctly sized for her. Another pause longer. I have thought about that for a long time. What it would be to lose the only place that fitted you. The room was very quiet. Ophis had not moved. But her hands, which had been folded with geometric precision in her lap, had changed. The fingers had loosened slightly. It was a small thing. It was a significant thing. My host, Drake said, has always had the particular quality of finding the people that need finding. I have watched this across many hosts, but never so clearly as in this one. The amber jewel warmed. Last night, when she stood in the rain, I felt it. The void reaching toward us. And I thought perhaps this is not accidental. Perhaps this is simply the world finally arranging itself the way it should have arranged itself a long time ago. Silence. Then Issei said, with the earnest directness that was simply how he was built, Drake. Are you saying you've been worried about her? A pause. I am a dragon, Drake said, with considerable dignity. I don't worry. But yes, Drake said, in a different register. For a long time. Yes. Issei looked at Ophis. She was looking at the gauntlet, and he couldn't fully read her expression, and he had been alive for 20 years and spent most of them being told, directly and indirectly, that reading people was not his strong suit. But he had always been better at feeling things than reading them, better at sensing the weight of what was present in the space between people than at parsing the specific signals. What he felt was something enormous and old that had been waiting, and had not expected to stop waiting, and was discovering that it had to revise that expectation. Ophis, he said quietly. She looked at him. Are you okay? He asked. She was quiet for long enough that he started to think she wasn't going to answer. I don't know what that word means for me, she said. I have existed for longer than most things that have words for their states. My states have not previously required categorization. She paused. I came to this world because I was removed from the only place I had ever been comfortable. I built Khaos Brigade because I believed it was the most direct path back to the dimensional gap. She looked at her hands. It was not a successful strategy. No, he said. I was used. She said it with the flat precision of someone identifying a fact they have no investment in softening. The people who gathered around me were not interested in the dimensional gap. They were interested in power. I was a symbol to them. A resource. Her expression didn't change, but the quality of the room around her did. I have been many things to many people. An object of fear, an object of worship. An objective. A pause. No one has asked me how I am. He held her gaze. I just did, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she said. You did. The sourceless light moved in the room the way light moves when something shifts, not the source changing, but the quality of what it lands on. Okay, Issei said, with the practical decisiveness that arrived in him when he had figured out what he needed to do. Then here's what I think. I don't have anywhere I need to be urgently. You said the integration needs time. I have questions about what I am now. You presumably have information about that. And Drake has apparently been holding things he wanted to say for an indeterminate number of centuries. He looked at her steadily. So let's just be here for a while. And figure it out. Is that okay with you? She looked at him with the same focused assessment she'd had in the rain, the look of something updating its model of the possible. You are not afraid of me, she said. You saved my life, he said. And then you cleaned my jacket and put a clock on my nightstand. Those are not the actions of something I should be afraid of. Something moved in her gold eyes, an expression that he was starting to think was her version of being surprised, which was a very contained and internal version of what surprise looked like on a normal face. The jacket was practical, she said. You would need it. Yeah. He smiled. I figured. He looked at Drake's gauntlet, then back at her. Can I ask you something? You can ask. The dimensional gap. What was it like? When it was yours? She was quiet for a moment. He could tell this wasn't the defensive quiet of someone who didn't want to answer. It was the careful quiet of someone reaching for something they haven't handled in a long time, and want to be accurate about. Silent, she said. In a way that nothing else has been, before or since. She looked at the window, which showed whatever it showed. He still hadn't identified the landscape outside, and was beginning to think it might not be a place in any conventional sense. Not the silence of absence. The silence of completion. Every frequency present and balanced so perfectly that the result was stillness. She paused. I existed there for longer than this planet has been solid. It was, she looked for the word. Correct. It was the only place that has ever felt correctly sized. And Great Red took it from you. He didn't take it, she said, with the precise honesty she applied to everything. He was also there. He belongs there, in his way. But his way is not my way. His presence is loud, enormous, fully occupied by its own existence. She paused. I could not be silent with him there. And silence was, she stopped. Silence was everything I needed. What do you need now? He asked. She looked at him. The question seemed to reach something, the way certain questions reach through multiple layers to something genuine underneath. He watched it land. I don't know, she said. I haven't needed things in a long time. Needs were inefficient. I decided I didn't have them. How'd that work out? She was quiet for a moment. Poorly, she said. He nodded. He didn't say I know or I understand or any of the things that would have been slightly presumptuous, because he didn't know, not fully, not from the inside. He just received it. Okay, he said. Then maybe that's something we figure out together. What you need. What I've become. What any of this means. He paused. I'm not going to pretend I have answers, but I'm also not going anywhere. So, she looked at him steadily. You trusted me last night without knowing me. Yeah, that was, she paused. Statistically unusual, I know. He shrugged. I've always been bad at statistics. She looked at him for a long time, then she said, There is a room through the door on the left with food. I didn't know what humans require specific things. I found what seemed typical. He blinked. You got food? I wasn't certain when you would wake. I wanted the option to be, she stopped. The tiniest adjustment in her expression. Available. He looked at her, this ancient, infinite, self-described seeker of silence, who had cleaned his jacket and placed a clock on his nightstand and gone to find food for a person she had known for less than 12 hours, and who was delivering each of these facts with the careful neutrality of someone who has not yet developed a vocabulary for what they're doing. Ophis, he said. Yes, you're a good person. She blinked. It was the most expressive thing he had yet seen her face do. I am not a person. I am the infinite dragon god. You can be both, he said easily. Come on. Let's eat. And you can tell me more about the dimensional gap, and Drake can tell us whatever else he's been holding on to, and we can figure out what I am now. He stood, and stretched, and felt the new architecture of himself settle with the rightness of something finding its configuration. One thing at a time, she stood. She was, when standing, considerably shorter than him, which he had registered in the rain, but which landed differently in the interior light, the size of her, the containment of everything she was within it. She walked toward the door on the left. At the threshold she stopped. Issei Hayadu, she said. Yeah? She didn't turn around. Why did you say hey? Last night. When you were dying. He thought about it. Because you were there, he said. And you look like someone who wasn't used to being talked to. And I thought, even if I'm dying, that's still worth doing. Talking to someone who doesn't get talked to enough. He paused. Was I wrong? She was still for a moment. No, she said. You were not wrong. She went through the door. He followed, and Drake was warm in his chest and quiet in the way he had been since last night. The new quiet, the settled one, and the sourceless light of the ancient room moved around them both like something that had been waiting a long time for the right configuration and had finally, unremarkably, found it. Outside, the world was doing its ordinary things. In Ko, people were going to work and coming home and making food and having conversations and navigating the 10,000 small frictions of daily life, none of them aware that in a space slightly outside their coordinates, a man with a dragon in his chest and a new room in his soul was sitting across a table from the infinite dragon god, eating what turned out to be fairly decent rice and pickled vegetables, while a heavenly dragon said, slowly and in full, the things he had been saving up for longer than most things had been alive. It was not, on the surface, a historic morning. It was, in every way that mattered, the beginning of everything. Void and Dragon, Chapter 3, The Factions React. The Gremry estate in the underworld had many rooms designed for many purposes, and Rias Gremry had, over the course of her life, used most of them for their intended functions. The library for reading, the training hall for combat preparation, the formal reception room for the political performances that came with being the daughter of one of the great devil houses. The room she was in now was her private study, and she was using it for something its designer had not specifically intended, which was standing very still in the center of it while her mind performed the specific, rigorous work of not reacting until she had all the information. She had most of the information. She was still working on not reacting. Run it again, she said. Akino Himejima, her queen, stood near the window with a report in one hand and an expression of careful professional neutrality that Rias recognized as the one Aquino wore when she had opinions she was choosing not to lead with. The monitoring report is the same as the first 2 times. The boosted gear signature in Co registered a critical event at approximately 11:47 last night. Light spear impact, consistent with Fallen Angel offensive technique, lethal force. She paused. The signature went dark for approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then it returned. Aquino set the report on the desk. Different. The base signature is the same. Drag is drag, that's not something that changes. But there's a secondary resonance that our instruments don't have a classification for. She paused. Kaneko identified it. Rias looked at her. Void, Aquino said. The words sat in the room with the particular weight of words that are technically short and practically enormous. Rias turned to the window. Outside, the underworld sky was its characteristic deep crimson, the light warm and familiar in the way that home is familiar, not always comforting, but always known. She looked at it for a moment. Ophis, she said. That's the working conclusion, yes. Ophis found him before we did. It appears so. She was quiet for a moment. The not reacting was getting harder. She was doing it anyway, because she had learned a long time ago that the reactions you had before you had all the information were the ones you most often regretted. Is he alive? She asked. The question came out more carefully than she intended, which told her something about the shape of what she was feeling. The signature is active and stable, Aquino said. He's alive. Rias let out a breath she had been holding in a very organized fashion. Where? Unknown. The void resonance. Its obscuring location. Whatever space he's in, it's not somewhere our tracking can reach. Aquino paused. Rias. You should know, Father is already aware, and the Citri family has been notified. Sona called 20 minutes ago. What did she say? She said, and I'm quoting, "This is a geopolitical emergency and I need to know if your family is going to handle it responsibly or if I need to contact the rating game committee." Aquino's expression remained carefully neutral. I told her I'd have you call her back. Of course she said that. Rias turned from the window. Get Kiba and Kaneko. And call Sona back. Tell her I'll meet her in an hour. She moved toward the door. And Aquino, yes? He's alive. She said it again, differently, not as a question this time, not as information being verified, but as something being set in place. Whatever else is happening. He's alive. That's the most important thing. Aquino looked at her for a moment with the expression that meant she had opinions she was still choosing not to lead with. Yes, she said. It is. Sona's Citri had a whiteboard. This was not unusual. Sona had whiteboards in most rooms she spent significant time in, because her mind operated in the visual spatial register of someone who thinks best when the thinking is arranged in front of them. What was unusual was that she had been writing on this one since 5 in the morning, and it now contained 4 columns, 11 subcolumns, 43 discrete data points, and 2 large question marks that had been drawn with more force than strictly necessary. She was adding a 44th data point when Tsubaki Shinra, her queen, arrived with tea and the expression of someone who has been awake as long as her king and has opinions about this. You should sleep, Tsubaki said. I'll sleep when I understand the threat matrix, Sona said. You've been saying that since 5 a.m. The threat matrix keeps developing new dimensions. She capped her marker. Sit down. I need to think out loud. Tsubaki sat. She had learned, over years of peerage service, that thinking out loud was Sona's version of a processing mode that other people might call emotional regulation, that the act of articulating the problem was, for her king, also the act of determining how she felt about it. She settled in with her tea and prepared to be useful by listening. Issei Haidu, Sona said. 20 years old. Boosted gear host. Unaffiliated, not a devil, not an angel, not a fallen angel, not a human with faction ties. Has been on our monitoring list since the Sacred Gear first registered active, flagged as a potential future recruitment target by approximately 6 different parties including Rias. She tapped the board. Last night, Rainier, operating outside sanctioned fallen angel parameters, which is its own problem, attacked him with lethal intent. Standard neutralized the potential threat protocol. She turned to face Tsubaki. she succeeded. But he's alive, Tsubaki said. He's alive because Ophis intervened. Sona crossed her arms. This is where the threat matrix gets complicated. Ophis is. She's not part of any framework we have for dealing with entities. She's not a devil, not an angel, not a god in the conventional sense. She is the infinite dragon. She exists outside every hierarchy we operate within. She has no obligations to any faction. She has no alliances. She has, as far as anyone has ever been able to determine, no interests beyond returning to the dimensional gap. Until now, Tsubaki said. Until now. Sona turned back to the board. She used void power to reconstruct a critically injured human. This has never happened before. The void power would have integrated with the host, with Drake's sacred gear, creating something we have no precedent for. She looked at the two large question marks. An unaffiliated boosted gear host who is partially constituted from the fundamental energy of the infinite dragon. Who is now, presumably, in some kind of proximity to Ophis. She paused. Do you understand why I've been awake since 5 a.m.? Because every faction with any awareness of sacred gears and infinite dragons is currently making the same calculations you are, Tsubaki said. Because every faction is going to want him, Sona said. And because the one entity in existence powerful enough to prevent every faction from getting him is the same entity that just rebuilt him from scratch. She capped the marker with the firmness of a gavel. He is the most significant unaffiliated variable in the current geopolitical situation, and as of 11:47 last night, he is also apparently a person that Ophis, the infinite dragon god, has decided she has an interest in. She looked at Tsubaki. We need to reach him before the less thoughtful parties do, and by less thoughtful parties, Kokobil still has assets that aren't fully decommissioned, Sona said. Vala's faction within what's left of Khaos Brigade will see an Ophis-touched boosted gear host as an ideological threat, or an ideological asset depending on the day. And Chow Chow, she stopped. Chow Chow will see him as exactly what he is, a power variable he cannot predict, which makes him a threat Chow Chow will want to neutralize before he understands what he's dealing with. Tsubaki was quiet for a moment. What's our approach? Sona thought about it, in the organized, thorough way she thought about things. Careful, she said. We approach carefully. We make clear we're not coming to acquire or neutralize. She picked up her tea. We come to inform. He deserves to know what he's walked into. She paused. What he's been walked into. None of this was his choice. In the dim offices of what remained of Khaos Brigade's operational center, a basement location that had survived 3 factional purges through the simple strategy of being too boring to thoroughly search, a man named Siegfried was having a conversation with Chow Chow that neither of them was enjoying. Ophis, Chow Chow said. Ophis, Siegfried confirmed. Chow Chow stood at the window of the basement level, which had a window because its previous occupant had believed strongly in the psychological importance of natural light, and looked at it with the focused stillness of someone organizing a very large response into a very contained expression. His true Longinus was not in hand, he was being casual, which was, Siegfried had learned, more alarming than when he was being formal. She's bonded to a boosted gear host, Chow Chow said. Rebuilt him. The void integration is, Siegfried checked the report. Our instruments can't fully classify it. The analysts are calling it unprecedented, which is unhelpful, extremely. Chow Chow turned from the window. His expression was the one Siegfried had learned to treat with the most caution, the one that looked like mild intellectual interest, and was actually the face he made when he was 3 decisions ahead of everyone in the room. Ophis, alone, is an obstacle. Ophis bound to a boosted gear host, a host who shares her fundamental energy, is a different category of obstacle. He paused, or asset depending on approach. The brigade remnants are already divided on interpretation, Siegfried said. Half want to make contact. They see an Ophis-linked boosted gear as a symbol. The other half understand that an Ophis who is no longer interested in brigade objectives is not an Ophis they can use, Chow Chow said. She saved a specific person. That means she has a specific person she cares about. His expression sharpened. Specific attachments are leverage. Siegfried was quiet for a moment. Are we moving on that? He asked. Chow Chow looked at him with a polite, empty regard he gave to questions he found premature. We're watching, he said. For now. Information first. He turned back to the window. I want to know who he is, everything. His history, his connections, his capabilities as they develop. He paused. And I want to know what Ophis does next, because the Ophis who walked away from the dimensional gap and built a faction of humans she didn't care about, that Ophis I understand. She was predictable. She was driven by a single objective. He was quiet. The Ophis who stands in the rain to save a specific person, that Ophis I don't understand yet. He turned from the window. I don't operate until I understand. Rias reached Co 3 hours after the reports came in. She went to the place where the monitoring signature had last been active, the wet street, still damp in the early morning, unremarkable in the way that sites of enormous events are always unremarkable from the outside. She stood there for a moment. She crouched and looked at the stones. There was a slight discoloration where the light spear had impacted. She had seen enough light spear damage to recognize it. She stood. Rainier, she said to Aquino beside her. Her faction will disavow, Aquino said. Standard protocol. She acted outside sanction parameters. That's the cover story. That's not the cover story, Rias said. That might even be true. The fallen angel factions have been disorganized since Azazel's, since everything changed. Individual operatives acting on old orders, old threat assessments. She looked at the street. She saw a boosted gear host developing and moved on standing neutralization protocol. A pause. It was still wrong. Yes, Aquino said. He was just living his life, Rias said quietly. Walking home. Not a threat to anyone. She looked up at the coast skyline, the familiar rooftops, the ordinary morning light. And now he's, she stopped. Different, Aquino said. Different. She turned. We need to find him before the others do. Can Kaneko track the void resonance at all? She says she can feel the edge of it, Aquino said. Like, the boundary of a space. She can't locate it directly, but she thinks she can find where it's adjacent to normal space. A pause. She also says, Aquino's expression shifted slightly. She says the void feels different than it used to. When Ophis was leading the brigade, it was cold. Contained. Pointed at something. She paused. Kaneko says now it feels. Feels what? Rias asked. Aquino looked at her steadily. Settled, she said. When Issei and Ophis came back into the main room after breakfast, which had been rice and pickled vegetables and, discovered in a secondary cabinet, surprisingly excellent fruit, and which had been accompanied by Drake speaking at length about the early age of the world in a voice that made the stones of the room resonate. The atmosphere of the space had changed. Ophis stood near the window. The thing outside it, the landscape that was not a landscape in any conventional sense, had shifted slightly, in the way that weather shifts, the quality of the light different. Someone is looking for us, she said. Issei looked up from where he'd been sitting, turning over in his hands the gauntlet that kept manifesting and then dispersing as Drake adjusted to the new configuration. Who? Multiple parties. She was looking at the not landscape. The Gremry girl. The Citri girl. Others with less considered intentions. A pause. They will find the boundary of this space eventually. Kaneko toujours has sensitivity to void frequencies. Kaneko's looking? The Gremry heir's peerage, yes. She turned from the window. We have perhaps 4 hours before contact becomes inevitable. Issei was quiet for a moment, processing. He had grown up in Co all his life and had known, in the background awareness way you know things about the place you live, that it was a place where certain things gathered. He had been aware of the Co Academy girls in the way everyone was aware of them, not with any particular intelligence insight, just the general understanding that there was something unusual about the concentration of remarkable people in one location. He had not previously had occasion to think carefully about what that meant. He was thinking carefully about it now. The Gremry heir, he said. Rias Gremry. Yes. She's a devil. Yes. And she's been watching me? Because of the boosted gear? Ophis looked at him with the direct assessment he was learning to read as her version of yes, and there's more. She had a reincarnation plan, she said. Standard devil practice. Identify a high-value sacred gear host, Approach at the appropriate time, offer a contract. A pause. You were on her list. I was on her list, he said. He absorbed this. So last night, if Rainier hadn't, eventually Ophis said. Yes. You would likely have been approached. Offered membership in her peerage. A reincarnation contract. She looked at him. It is not necessarily a bad option. The Gremry are among the more principled of the great houses. But I didn't get that option, he said. I got Rainier's light spear and then I got you. Yes. He looked at his hands. The gauntlet had settled. Drake had stopped manifesting and dispersing and had arrived at a new stable configuration, the jewel warm against his knuckles. What am I now? He asked. In terms of faction. Classification. Whatever system these people use. Ophis was quiet for a moment. Unclassified, she said. There is no existing category for a boosted gear host with void integration. A pause. Several factions will attempt to create a category that suits their purposes. The category they create will be designed to justify whatever they want to do with you. And what do you think I am? He asked. She looked at him. It was a simple question, but he could see it reaching something, the same way his other simple questions had reached things, going through the layers of her ancient, calibrated precision to something more fundamental underneath. I think, she said, with the careful honesty she applied to everything, that you are the first person in a very long time who has asked me questions because they wanted to know the answers. She paused. I don't have a faction classification for that. He smiled. That's okay. I'll take it. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then, when they find this space, and they will, you will need to make a decision about affiliation. An unaffiliated void-touched boosted gear host is a provocation. Every faction will interpret the ambiguity according to their own threat assessment. What are my options? You could affiliate with a devil house. Gremry or Citri are the most accessible. A pause. You could claim independent status, which is technically valid but practically very difficult to defend without significant power. Another pause. Or you could, she stopped. Or I could what? She was looking at the window again, at the not landscape, the space that was hers. You could remain here. With me. She said it with the flat neutrality of someone presenting a data point. I have no faction. I am outside every hierarchy. Anyone who wants to reach you would have to go through void power to do it, which is, a pause. Not a comfortable prospect for most parties. You'd protect me, he said. I rebuilt you, she said. The void I used is mine. What happens to you? I have an investment in it now. She turned from the window. This is not, I want to be clear. This is not a contract. I am not claiming you. I am saying that what I did last night created a connection, and I take that seriously. He looked at her steadily. What do you want, Ophis? The question reached her the way the other questions had, going somewhere specific. I want, she stopped. Started again. I told you about the dimensional gap. About the silence. She looked at her hands. I spent a very long time believing what I wanted was to go back there, to return to the only place that fitted me. A pause. I am revising that assessment. Why? She looked at him directly, with the gold eyes that contained something he was slowly learning to read, an expression that was ancient and new at once. The face of something that has been asked a question it hasn't been asked before and is discovering, in the asking, what its answer actually is. Because last night, she said, someone said hey to me? While they were dying. Because I was there, and they thought I might be someone who didn't get talked to enough. She paused. I have been present in this world for a very long time. I have never been noticed. In that way. She looked at him. I find I want to understand what that is. What it continues to be. Another pause, and in it the weight of something enormous being said in very few words. I find I want you to continue existing. He was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, he said. Then I'll stay. For now. Until we figure out what comes next. He held her gaze. But when Rias and Sona find us, and they will, we talk to them. We don't hide. We don't run. We tell them what happened and we figure out what position makes sense. He paused. Is that okay with you? She considered it. I don't talk to factions, she said. You'll be talking to people, he said. Rias is a person. Sona is a person. Kaneko is. He paused, and something in his expression shifted slightly. Kaneko is a person who can apparently feel void frequencies, which means she has some kind of connection to what you are, and that seems like something worth understanding. Ophis was quiet. You negotiate on my behalf? She said. I negotiate with you, he said. Beside you. Not for you. He paused. I'm not your representative. I'm just, he thought about it. I'm the person who says hey to you. That's all. The sourceless light moved in the room. 4 hours, Ophis said. Then we have 4 hours, he said. Tell me more about the early age of the world. Drake was getting to the interesting part. She looked at him for a moment with the expression he was beginning to love, the contained, precise, ancient face of something encountering something new and finding it, against all prior expectation, entirely worth encountering. She sat down. She began to speak. Outside, 4 hours away, the factions moved toward them like weather, and in the space that was hers and was now, incrementally, theirs, the silence was not empty but full, the right kind of full, the kind that meant something was present rather than something was absent, the kind of silence that, for the first time in a very long time, Ophis did not want to be alone in. Kaneko toujours found the boundary at 3 hours and 47 minutes. She didn't announce it dramatically. She stopped walking in the middle of an unremarkable stretch of Koa's eastern residential district, on a street that looked like every other street. Low walls, late spring gardens, the smell of someone cooking lunch somewhere nearby, and she stood very still with her eyes closed, the way she stood still when she was reading something the rest of them couldn't access. Then she opened her eyes and said, Here? Rias looked at the street. There's nothing here. There's an edge here, Kaneko said. The space changes. The void is on the other side. She paused, in the considered way she approached most things. It's different than before. Different how? Aquino asked. Kaneko thought about it for a moment. Before, when Ophis was running the brigade, the void felt like a held breath. Like something waiting. She looked at the apparently empty air in front of her. Now it feels like, she paused again. Like a room someone is actually living in. Rias absorbed this. Can you open it? She asked. I can knock, Kaneko said. The feeling arrived before the sound did. Issei was in the middle of a sentence about Drake's description of the early formation of sacred gears. Ophis had been listening with the focused attention she brought to everything, occasionally offering corrections that were simultaneously gentle and absolute, the corrections of someone who was there, when he felt something at the edge of the space. A presence. Several presences. Ophis had felt it already. She was already standing. They're here, she said. 4 hours almost exactly, he said. Punctual. The Citri girl values precision, Ophis said. The Gremry girl values thoroughness. They would have cross-referenced their tracking and approach together. She paused. There is a third signature, the Nikomata. Kaneko, Issei said. There was a feeling at the boundary of the space, not aggressive, not forced. Something careful. A request rather than a demand. Issei stood. I'll open it. Ophis looked at him. You know how? He considered this. He hadn't known how a moment ago. But the void in him had settled over the past hours into something he could feel with increasing clarity, not control, not mastery, but familiarity, the way you become familiar with a new room by simply spending time in it. He could feel the boundary of the space. He could feel how it worked. He reached out, not physically but in the way that was new to him, and the boundary opened. The 3 women who stepped through into the space were. Issei registered this with the specific, helpless appreciation that was simply how his brain processed visual information. Extraordinary. This had always been true of him. He had made peace with it in his late teens, deciding that the appreciation was not the problem, what you did with it was the problem, and choosing to simply be a person who found the world beautiful and tried not to be weird about it. Rias Gremry was tall, with crimson hair that was exactly as remarkable as its reputation, and blue-green eyes that were currently performing a very controlled version of an emotion that was not as controlled as she wanted it to be. She was looking at him with something he couldn't immediately classify, relief, calculation, and something underneath both that she had put a professional layer over. Sona Citri was shorter, dark-haired, with glasses and an expression of organized assessment that reminded him of a professor he'd had in his first year at university, someone for whom the world was a problem to be solved and who was perpetually, mildly disappointed by its refusal to cooperate fully. Kaneko was small and white-haired and was looking at Ophis with an expression that was more complicated than either of the others. Not fear, not hostility, but the careful look of someone encountering something they have a history with and are re-evaluating. All three of them had stopped just inside the boundary. "Issei Haidu," Rias said. "Yeah," he said. "Hi." She blinked. He got the impression she had prepared for several opening scenarios, and Hai had not been among them. "I'm Rias Gremery." She composed herself quickly. He could see it happen, the professional layer reasserting itself. "This is Sona Citri and Kaneko Tuju." "I know who you are," he said. Ophis explained. He glanced at Ophis, who had positioned herself slightly behind and to his left, and who was watching the three arrivals with the polite, absolute attention of something that has decided to observe rather than engage. "I'm glad you're here. There's a lot to figure out." Rias blinked again. Sona's expression, by contrast, sharpened slightly. He got the impression she approved of people who led with the practical. "You're remarkably calm," Sona said. "I've been told that," he said. "Please sit down." "Do you want, Ophis, is there tea?" "I feel like there should be tea." A pause. "There is tea," Ophis said, with the flatness of someone confirming a fact they find mildly surprising themselves. Rias and Sona exchanged a look that contained a very large amount of information compressed into approximately half a second. Kaneko had not looked away from Ophis. They sat, all of them, which required the retrieval of additional chairs from a room that appeared to produce furniture when the social situation called for it, which Issei had decided to simply accept, around a table that had not been there this morning. The tea arrived, which was genuine and apparently excellent, because Sona made an involuntary expression of approval after the first sip before returning to her assessment phase. "I want to establish what we know," Sona said, because she was clearly someone who preferred to build on confirmed foundations. "The boosted gear was activated in a critical event last night. You were attacked by Rainier. You died, clinically if briefly, and were revived through void energy." She looked at him. "That's accurate?" "Accurate," he said. "The void integration, how are you experiencing it currently?" He thought about it honestly. "Like a new room," he said. "I can feel it. It's present. Not intrusive. It doesn't feel foreign." He paused. "Drake doesn't seem bothered by it either. They've been," he glanced inward, "coexisting, I guess." "Peacefully," Drake said, in the below sound register, with enormous dignity. Rias had been watching him with that layered expression. "What are your current power levels?" "I don't know," he said. "We haven't tested." He looked at Ophis. "We spent the morning talking." Rias looked at Ophis for the first time since sitting down. The look was careful, not hostile, but extremely alert, the way you look at something you don't have a reliable framework for. "Ophis," she said. "Gremery," Ophis said. A pause. "Thank you," Rias said. "For saving him." Something in the room shifted slightly. It was an unexpected thing to say. He could see it land unexpectedly on everyone, including, from the fractional adjustment in her expression, Ophis. "You had a reincarnation plan for him," Ophis said. It wasn't accusatory. It was the flat delivery of someone confirming information. "Yes," Rias said without flinching. "He was on my list. I was going to approach him at the right time and offer a contract." She held Ophis's gaze. "That's standard practice. He would have had a choice." She paused. "I'm aware that I don't have a claim on him. I never did. I'm simply glad he's alive." Ophis looked at her for a long moment. "You mean that?" she said. "Yes," Rias said. Another fractional adjustment in Ophis's expression. The one Issei was learning meant she was updating her assessment of something. Sona had been making notes during this exchange, which Issei found both amusing and completely in character for someone he had known for approximately 12 minutes. She looked up. "The immediate concern is your status. An unaffiliated void-integrated boosted gear host is, in terms of the current geopolitical arrangement, deeply complicated." "I know," he said. Ophis explained. "What she may not have explained," Sona said, with the careful tone of someone delivering information they expect to be unwelcome, "is how fast the other parties are moving. Cao Cao is aware. His operatives have been monitoring sacred gear signatures in this region for years. He'll have had reports within hours of the event. Issei absorbed this. Cao Cao. Hero faction. Former hero faction. Currently, independent, but aligned with several destabilizing interests. Sona set her pen down. He will view you as a threat or a potential asset. Probably a threat first. He doesn't like variables he can't predict. What does he do with threats he can't predict? Issei asked. Sona's expression was honest. He attempts to eliminate them before they develop further. The room was quiet for a moment. Okay, Issei said. That's useful to know. He looked at Ophis. You knew this. Yes, she said. I considered it a manageable concern. It's manageable, he said, but it's also a reason to not spend too much time figuring things out slowly. He turned back to Sona and Rias. What are you proposing? Sona and Rias looked at each other again. The compressed information half-second exchange. Affiliation, Rias said. Not necessarily with my household. But with someone. Something that puts you inside a protective structure. She paused. An unaffiliated target is the easiest kind to move against. What are the options? My peerage, Rias said, and there was something in how she said it, straightforward, without the performance of indifference, that he found respectable. The offer I would have made anyway. It's genuine. I want you to know that. Sona's household, Sona said. Also genuine. I would value a void-integrated boosted gear host for reasons that are entirely strategic, and I'll be transparent about that. I'm not going to dress it up. I appreciate that, he said. Or, Sona continued, independent status, backed by sufficient power and political acknowledgement that attacking you carries unacceptable risk for anyone who tries. She looked at him steadily. That option is harder. It requires demonstrated capability and a level of deterrence that most individuals can't achieve. She paused, and glanced at Ophis, and said nothing further, because the rest of that sentence was self-evident. Issei thought about it. He thought about what he'd said to Ophis this morning, that he would stay, for now, while they figured out what came next. He thought about what Ophis had said about not wanting him to affiliate in a way that removed her from the equation. He thought about what Drake had said about this not being accidental. He thought about the fact that he had woken up this morning in an ancient room with a clock on the nightstand, and that the infinite dragon had gone to find food, and that the morning had been the most real morning he'd had in a long time. I want to make something clear, he said. About Ophis. Everyone looked at him. She saved my life. She used something of herself to do it. That created a connection. She's explained it. I understand it. I'm not going to take any affiliation that requires her to be excluded or treated as a threat. He looked at Rias, then Sona, then back. She's not Khaos Brigade anymore. She's not a symbol for anyone's agenda. She's a person who made a decision last night, and I think she deserves to be treated accordingly. He paused. If that's a deal-breaker for either of you, I need to know now. A silence. Rias was looking at him with that layered expression again. The one he couldn't fully read. It's not a deal-breaker, she said. It's a complication, Sona said, with characteristic precision. But not a deal-breaker. Ophis acting independently of faction interest is not, practically, a worse situation than Ophis leading a destabilizing coalition. If anything, it's preferable. She paused. Provided she has no interest in reassembling anything. I don't, Ophis said. She said it flatly, without defensive coloring. The flatness of a simple fact. The brigade was a mistake. The people in it used me. I was aware of this and continued because I had no better option. She looked at Sona steadily. I have a better option now. Sona looked at her for a moment. Then she wrote something in her notes. Issei got the impression it was something like reassess Ophis threat classification. Kaneko had not spoken since they arrived. She sat at the end of the table with her cup of tea and watched Ophis with the careful, undemonstrative focus that was her primary mode in unfamiliar situations. Ophis had not spoken to her directly, but the two of them had been in a kind of peripheral awareness of each other since the moment Kaneko stepped through the boundary. Issei had felt it, the specific quality of two things that shared a frequency recognizing each other across a room. When the main conversation reached a natural pause, Sona reviewing her notes, Rias and Issei discussing practical logistics, the normal human activity of people figuring out what comes next. Kaneko set her cup down. You feel different, she said. To Ophis. Ophis looked at her. Yes. When you led the brigade, Kaneko said, your void felt like. She paused, choosing her words with the care of someone who doesn't use many of them and wants each one to be accurate. Like a door that only opened one way. Everything pointing at one thing. The dimensional gap. Yes, Ophis said. Now it feels like. Kaneko paused again. Like a room with windows. She looked at Ophis steadily. What changed? Ophis was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Issei. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him, with the gold eyes that held the specific quality of things that have found what they were looking for without having known they were looking. And Kaneko followed her gaze, and whatever she saw in it produced a very small, very deliberate expression on her face that was Kaneko Tuz's version of something significant. She picked up her tea again. Okay, she said, and returned to her quiet observation. Issei, who had been explaining to Rias that yes, he was genuinely okay with the situation and no, he wasn't in shock, caught this exchange in his peripheral awareness and filed it carefully. The discussion took 2 more hours. By the end of it, they had arrived at something that Sona described as a provisional independent arrangement, and Rias described as we'll figure it out as we go, which were, Issei thought, the same thing expressed in their respective native languages. He would remain in Ophis's space for now. It was, practically, the most defensible position available, and Sona had acknowledged this with the brisk pragmatism of someone updating her threat matrix in real time. Rias's peerage would serve as a point of contact with the broader Devil community. Sona's household would handle political liaison with the other factions, and Issei would train. You don't know what you are yet, Sona said, as they were preparing to leave. The integration needs to be understood, tested, documented, developed. A power you don't understand is a liability. She looked at him over her glasses with the expression of someone delivering a grade. I'd recommend starting with baseline comparisons. What your boosted gear could do before, what it does now, how the void interacts with the sacred gear mechanics. Who does that testing? He asked. Ideally someone who understands both systems, she said. She glanced at Ophis. You have the most qualified consultant available. Ophis looked at Sona with the faint expression that meant she was deciding whether to be amused or not. You're asking me to train him. I'm noting that you are uniquely positioned to do so, Sona said. A pause. I wasn't planning not to, Ophis said. Sona made another note. Issei suspected it said Ophis has plans. At the boundary, Rias paused. She had been moving toward it with the organized efficiency of someone wrapping up a task and then stopped, turned, and looked at Issei with the expression fully present for the first time, the professional layer absent, just the person underneath it. I'm glad you're alive, she said. Simply. I know I said it before, but I want to say it directly. Not as a strategic assessment. Just, she paused. I had been thinking about meeting you for a while. I'm glad there's still time. He looked at her. Thank you, he said, with the same simplicity. For coming. And for approaching it the way you did. He paused. I know it's complicated. Most things worth doing are, she said. She stepped through. Sona followed. Kaneko paused at the boundary, looked back at Ophis one more time, and said, very quietly, just to her, the room with windows is better. Then she was gone. The space was quiet again. Issei stood at the closed boundary and listened to the particular silence of the place, the one that had been there when he first woke up, the one that was not absence but presence, full in the way that mattered. He turned. Ophis was standing near the window. The night landscape outside had shifted again, the light different in the way the light had been different all day, responding to something he was still learning to read. That went well, he said. Better than expected, she said. The Gremry girl is a pause. She is not what I anticipated. What did you anticipate? A devil pursuing an acquisition. She looked at the night landscape. She was something else. She was someone who was worried about me, he said. Ophis was quiet. People worry about you, she said. You don't seem to fully account for that. He thought about it. I guess I'm not used to it, he said. Growing up, I was kind of, he shrugged. Ordinary. Not someone people worried about particularly. She turned from the window and looked at him with the gold eyes. You are not ordinary, she said. I was yesterday. You were always, she stopped. Started again, with the precision of someone who wants to be accurate. The void doesn't integrate with people. It doesn't cooperate with things that are incompatible with it. I've been void for longer than you can accurately imagine, and what I put into you, it found somewhere to go. Immediately. Without resistance. She paused. That doesn't happen because someone is ordinary. He looked at her. What does it mean? He asked. I don't know exactly, she said. I told you, I've never done this before. I'm learning what it means at the same pace you are. A pause. But it means something. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Then we figure it out. One thing at a time. He looked at the window, at the not landscape, at the light that was her light in the way that all of this was hers. Can I ask you something? You always ask, she said. Do you like it here? He asked. This space. Your space. He looked around at the ancient stone and the sourceless light and the window that showed something only she fully understood. Is it the silence you needed? Or is it just the closest available thing? She was quiet for a long time. He had learned not to fill her silences. It was the closest available thing, she said finally. After the dimensional gap. I built it because I needed somewhere to exist. A pause. It has been. She looked at the room around her, at the chairs that had appeared when guests arrived, at the table that had produced itself for the morning's conversation, at the clock still ticking on the nightstand in the room where he had woken up. It has been changing. Changing how? She looked at him. It is noisier than it was, she said. He winced. I can try to be quieter. I don't want you to be quieter, she said. The words arrived simply, without drama, in the flat and honest way she said true things. He received them the same way. Okay, he said. She turned back to the window. Tomorrow, she said, we begin? Your training. Understanding what the integration does. A pause. It will be difficult. The void is not a power that responds to the same mechanics as sacred gear development. I will need to teach you a different way of thinking about what you are. I'm a good student, he said. You are, she said. Unexpectedly, he smiled. You've known me for less than 24 hours. I have been aware of Drake for longer than Ko has been a town, she said. And you have been his host for 20 years. She turned, and there was something in her expression, the contained, precise face that was learning new configurations. I was paying attention. I simply didn't, she paused. I didn't have a framework for what I was paying attention to. He thought about that. And now? He asked. She looked at him with the gold eyes that contained everything she was, the ancient silence, the infinite depth, the new and unfamiliar warmth of something that had decided, without quite planning to, that this particular noise was worth keeping. Now, she said, I'm learning the framework. The sourceless light moved. The clock ticked in the other room. Somewhere below the floor, beneath the ancient stone, Issei could feel the void in him resonating with the void in the space around him. Not dramatically, not loudly, but consistently, like a heartbeat that has found its rhythm and settled into it, content to continue without announcement. Drake, in the warmth at the center of his chest, said nothing. He didn't need to. Chow Chow's operatives arrived in Ko on a Tuesday, which Issei would later reflect was an extremely Tuesday thing to do. There were 4 of them, which was either a significant underestimation of what he and Ophis represented or a deliberate provocation designed to produce information rather than a result. He would find out later that it was the second, that Chow Chow had sent them not to win but to observe, to measure, to return with data on what a void-integrated boosted gear host actually did when threatened. He didn't know that yet, standing in the eastern district of Ko at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, looking at 4 people who had arrived with the specific organized energy of individuals who had been briefed thoroughly and were operating on a clear objective. He had been outside alone for the first time since waking in Ophis's space. This had been Ophis's idea, actually, carefully, practically her idea, delivered that morning with the characteristic flatness of someone presenting a training protocol. You need to re-establish your baseline in normal space, she had said. The integration has been stable in here. We don't know how it behaves in the external world under ambient conditions. She had looked at him. Walk. An hour. I'll be aware of your position. You can feel me from here? He had asked. The void I put in you is mine, she had said, with the patient precision of someone explaining something that should be self-evident. I am always aware of it. It's not surveillance. It's, she had paused, reaching for accurate language. Adjacency. You're adjacent to me now. I'll know if something changes. He had walked. And it had been good, actually. The ordinary streets of Ko, the spring light on the familiar rooftops, the smell of someone's garden and someone's lunch, and the distant sound of the university campus 2 blocks over. He had walked and felt the new architecture of himself operating in the world, the void resonance quiet and present, like a second heartbeat he was learning to live beside. He had been approximately 20 minutes into the return route when they appeared. They didn't announce themselves, which he was coming to understand was standard practice in the world he had woken into, the world of factions and sacred gears and people who had been briefed thoroughly and operated on clear objectives. They materialized from 4 different directions simultaneously, which indicated coordination and preparation, and they stood at equidistant positions around him on the street, which indicated someone had thought carefully about containment geometry. 3 of them he didn't recognize. The 4th was a woman with silver-streaked hair and a sacred gear already manifested, twin swords of light, the color of concentrated summer, that she held with the ease of someone for whom this was a natural extension of herself. She looked at him with the professional assessment he was learning to recognize as the face people made when they were seeing the target rather than the person. Issei Hayadu, she said. You know, he said, people keep doing that. Just saying my name at me. Is that a faction thing? She didn't blink. You've been identified as a significant variable. Our employer wants you assessed. Assessed, he said. Power levels. Void integration status. Combat capability. She said it with the flat efficiency of someone reading a checklist. If you cooperate, this goes quickly, and if I don't? She looked at him. Then we get the information the other way, she said. He was quiet for a moment. He could feel Drake. The warmth in his chest had shifted, the familiar comfortable ember becoming something more alert, the way a fire responds when more air reaches it. And underneath that, or alongside it, the void, which had been a quiet second heartbeat all morning, was doing something different. It was listening, not awakening, not activating. Listening. The way a very large and very quiet thing listens when something in its vicinity has attracted its attention. Partner, Drake said, in the below sound register. The 3rd one on your left has a sealing tool. I can feel it. He didn't look at the 3rd one. Sealing tool, he said quietly, small. Wrist mounted. This was not just an observation mission. He understood the strategy then, information gathering primary, sealing secondary. Observe what he does when pushed. If he reveals something they weren't expecting, seal him before he can develop further. Return with either data or a contained asset. He thought about what Sona had said. Chow Chow views variables he can't predict as threats he wants to eliminate. He thought about Ophis's voice this morning, explaining adjacency with the patient precision of someone who wanted him to understand he was not alone in the external world. He took a breath. Okay, he said. I'm going to give you one chance to go back to whoever sent you and tell them that this approach isn't going to work, and that if they want to talk to me they can find a different way to start the conversation. He paused. That's the offer. The silver-haired woman looked at him. That's not an option we were given, she said. That's unfortunate, he said. Then the 3rd one on his left moved for the sealing tool, and everything became very immediate. The boosted gear manifested before he consciously called it. This was new. Before, in the theoretical before, the version of him that had existed until 48 hours ago, the sacred gear required deliberate activation. A thought, a call, the specific willingness to bring it forward. Now it arrived ahead of his decision, responding to the threat assessment with an autonomy that felt less like his power acting independently and more like a reflex, a body protecting itself. Boost. The familiar doubling of energy, but different now, not clean, not alone. The boosted gear's energy and the void were not separate channels. They had integrated at a level he hadn't fully understood until this moment, watching them activate together, because together was the only way they knew how to be now. The sacred gear's power multiplied, and the void amplified the multiplication. It was like someone had added a second engine to something that was already accelerating. The 3rd operative's hand was 6 inches from the sealing device when Issei moved. He moved faster than he should have been able to. Not boosted gear fast, that had a specific, pressured quality he recognized. This was different. Quieter. The void didn't announce itself. It simply reorganized the distance between where he was and where he needed to be. He was beside the third operative before the sealing device cleared its mount. He took it. Not violently. He just removed it from the operative's wrist with the careful precision of someone picking up something fragile, the void lending him an accuracy that felt like knowing rather than trying. He held it. He looked at it. "Don't," he said to the operative, who had frozen. The silver-haired woman moved. The twin swords came at him from the left in a coordinated arc, high and low simultaneously, designed to leave no clean evasion angle. She was good, genuinely good, the kind of good that came from years of serious practice with a sacred gear that rewarded commitment. He didn't dodge. Boost. The second doubling arrived, and with it, something from the void, not power exactly, more like knowledge. Where the blades were going. Not prediction, not calculation. The void extended through space the way water extends, occupying the gaps, and he felt the blade's paths the way you feel rain before it reaches you. He stepped around the first. He redirected the second with his forearm, the void forming a density there that the blades skidded across rather than cut through, and he came out of the rotation facing the silver-haired woman at close range. She was good enough to be surprised without being frozen by it. She reset immediately, swords repositioning. The other two operatives were moving now, converging from the sides. He felt drag warming further in his chest. "Partner. You don't have to do this alone." "I know," he said aloud. The void shifted. She felt it at the boundary of the space. Not the fight, not the specific mechanics of it. But the void in him activating, the adjacency pulling taut, the specific quality of a threat directed at something that was now, whether either of them had fully articulated this yet, hers. She was through the boundary before she decided to move. This was not characteristic of her. She had existed for longer than most things that existed and had developed, in that time, a relationship with decision-making that was thorough and deliberate, and not given to the impulsive. When she moved, she had calculated. She had not calculated this. She had simply felt the threat and moved. She arrived on the street in Ko on a Tuesday afternoon and took in the situation in approximately half a second. Issei at the center, three operatives converging, the silver-haired woman with the light swords repositioning for another engagement, and then she stood in the middle of the street, and the void came off her in the way weather comes off an incoming storm, and everything stopped. Not physically stopped. The operatives could still move. Their bodies still functioned, but they didn't move, because what Ophis generated was not a technique. It wasn't a jutsu or a sacred gear ability, or any of the measurable, classifiable things that faction operatives train to respond to. It was the fundamental quality of the infinite dragon standing in the open air and being fully present, and the response to that was not tactical. It was the response of everything small encountering something that had existed before small was a concept. The silver-haired woman's swords were still raised. She did not lower them. But she did not continue either. She stood there with the expressions of all four operatives sharing the same sudden, acute awareness of scale. Ophis looked at them. "Leave," she said. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. They left. The street was empty inside 12 seconds. Issei stood in the middle of it, gauntlet still active, the void still humming alongside Drake's warmth, watching the space where four trained operatives had been. He turned. Ophis was standing 5 feet away. She looked. He searched for the word and found it. Different. Not more powerful. Not more visible. She had always been the most powerful thing in any space she occupied. The difference was something else. Something in the way she was standing, the quality of her presence. Like something that had been held carefully had, for a moment, stopped being careful. She was looking at him. "Are you injured?" she asked. "No," he said. "You didn't need to." "I know I didn't need to," she said. He looked at her. She had come out of the space. The space that was hers, that she had built to be the closest available version of the silence she needed, the internal world she had curated for a very long time. She had left it, without calculation, because something in him had activated. "You came anyway," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. He absorbed that. "Thank you," he said. "You had them," she said. "I did," he said. But you came anyway. She looked at him with the gold eyes and didn't say anything, which was its own kind of answer. Around them, the Tuesday afternoon of Co continued its ordinary operations, someone's window open, the distant sound of a bicycle, the smell of a garden 2 doors down, the utterly unremarkable street on which the Infinite Dragon had just stood in the open air and told 4 trained operatives to leave, with a quality of presence so complete that they had not questioned the instruction. Issei looked at the sealing device in his hand. He turned it over once. He put it in his pocket. We need to tell Sona about this, he said. Yes. She's going to make a lot of notes. Likely. He looked at Ophis. Can we walk back? He asked. Not straight back. Just walk for a bit. He paused. I want to show you something. She looked at him steadily. What? There's a place near the river, he said. I used to go there when I needed to think. It's quiet. Different from your quiet. But it's a good one. He paused. I want to know if you like it. She was still for a moment. I am not accustomed to being shown things, she said. I know, he said. Come anyway. The river path was exactly as he remembered, narrow, tree-lined, the water visible through gaps in the spring foliage, the particular sound of moving water that was the consistent background of his childhood thinking. He had come here as a teenager when things were difficult, and as a young adult when he needed space between himself and the world, and it had always been, reliably, simply, good. He watched her experience it. She walked beside him at the careful distance she maintained, not cold, not formal, simply precise, the distance of someone who had not yet fully learned that proximity was not a threat. She looked at the water. She looked at the trees. She looked at the way the light moved through the new leaves, the specific green of spring light, the thing that made May light different from every other month's light. She was very still, walking. Not frozen, she moved, she followed the path, she adjusted to the uneven ground with the automatic ease of something that has inhabited many spaces, but still in the internal way, the quality of attention. He didn't say anything. He had learned her silences well enough to know that this one was the processing kind, the kind that wanted room, not interruption. They walked for a while. It sounds like thinking, she said finally. He looked at her. The water? The whole of it. She looked at the river. The water is consistent but not repetitive. The light changes. There is something moving. A pause. It sounds like a mind working. Not resolved. In process. He had never heard it described that way. He turned it over and found it entirely accurate. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what it is. She stopped at a point where the path widened and the river was fully visible, a stretch where the water moved in a broad, unhurried curve and the trees on the far bank reflected in it clearly, doubled and rippling. She looked at it. He stood beside her. In the dimensional gap, she said, everything was equalized. The silence was nothing against nothing. No friction. No becoming. She paused. This is different. This is, she looked for the word. This is becoming, audibly. You like it, he said. I find it, she stopped. Reconsidered. I find it difficult to determine whether I like it or whether I'm simply not yet accustomed to the volume of the world. Another pause. But I wanted to keep walking when the path started to end. I didn't want to stop. He thought about that. Ophis, he said. Yes. The fight today, he paused. When they came at me. The void activated differently than it has in training this morning. It knew what to do before I did, like it had its own understanding of the threat. She was looking at the water. Yes, that's not just sacred gear instinct, he said. Drake activates on threat assessment, but it's a response to my decision to engage. This was ahead of my decision. The void is not a tool, she said. I told you this. It doesn't wait for instruction. It occupies all the spaces around your decisions. When the threat came, it had already been considering the geometry of it. She paused. It is part of you now. Not an addition. Not an augmentation. It thinks at your edges. Is that what it does for you? He asked. Your void. She looked at him then, from the river. Mine is different, she said. I am void. What you have is a gift of it. A portion. Shaped to fit the host. She paused. It's shaped to fit you specifically. What does that mean? She was quiet for a moment. It means, she said carefully, that the portion of my fundamental nature that now lives in you has become, irreversibly, something different from what it was when it was only mine. It is yours now. Another pause. I have thought about this. It should concern me. The void is, it is not something that divides without consequence. Are you concerned? He asked. She looked at the water. No, she said. I find that the portion I gave is not missing. It is still present. I am still aware of it. She paused. I am aware of it because I am aware of you. He received this in the full way. The river moved. The light through the leaves made its shifting patterns on the water. A bird somewhere in the trees was doing something uncomplicated and persistent. When I was growing up, he said, I used to come here and think about the fact that my life felt like a waiting room. Like I was in between something, but I couldn't figure out what I was waiting for. She was listening. I know what I was waiting for now, he said. He wasn't looking at her when he said it, which was the only reason he caught her expression in profile, the fractional, enormous adjustment, the gold eyes on the water, the face of something that had existed for longer than rivers and was, for the first time, finding the sound of one worth stopping for. I have not waited for things, she said. I pursued. Or I endured. I haven't, she paused. Waited implies the thing is coming. I didn't believe things were coming. A very long pause. I am revising that. He looked at her then. She was still looking at the river. He thought about what Drake had said. Perhaps this is simply the world finally arranging itself the way it should have arranged itself a long time ago. He thought about the clock on the nightstand, and the clean jacket, and the food she had gone to find for a person she had known for hours. He thought about her on the street this afternoon, walking out of her space without calculation because something in him had pulled taut. He thought about the way she had just said I am revising that, with the quiet certainty of something making an irrevocable update. Ophis, he said. Yes. I'm glad you were in that rain. She turned from the river and looked at him, and the gold eyes held everything they always held, the ancient depth, the infinite patience, the new and growing warmth of something that had decided, by degrees and then all at once, that this particular noise was the kind that didn't diminish silence. It completed it. Yes, she said, simply, the way she said true things. The report reached Chow Chow at 7 that evening. He read it once. He set it down. He read it again. 4 operatives, all capable, none of them amateurs, routed in under a minute, won by the host's demonstrated capability, which was already significantly beyond expected parameters for a boosted gear at this stage of development. 3 by Ophis's intervention, which had been. He read the operative's description again. She arrived without transition. No evident technique. She stood in the street, and the void came off her, and I understood in a way that bypassed every tactical framework I have, that continuing was not an option I had access to anymore. He set the report down. He thought for a long time. The Ophis he had built his calculations around was a frustrated, singular entity seeking a specific objective. Powerful, yes. Essentially limitless in pure energy terms. But directed. She wanted the dimensional gap. Everything she did was in service of that goal. And directed power, however enormous, was power you could plan around. Power you could potentially redirect. The Ophis in this report had not left her space because of the dimensional gap. She had left her space because someone was threatening Issei Haidu. He tapped the desk once, twice. The variable he needed to understand was not the boosted gear integration. It was what it meant for the infinite dragon to have a specific person she moved for. He reached for a new page. He began a different kind of plan.